we know we can be. That when that kind of thing happens, we do have a tendency to get a little kind of a little Sunday schoolish, a little telling stories to kind of come to a neat little conclusion, and it's not neat. Our lives aren't these neat little um, stories that we can tell always with happy endings. They're not. So that's a great question, because that is always the challenge, I think, when you're writing about a serious social issue. But the most important thing is the story. What happens to these people? Who are they? Do we care about them? How do their personalities evolve? I'm one of these people that thinks that we change all the time. I know I'm not the same person I was even a year ago. I once heard some fellow on a talk show say something about, oh, people don't change. You are who you are, you stay who you are. And I could not disagree more. I remember when I heard him say that, I wanted to shout at the television screen and say, that's just not true. We can change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse, heaven knows. But we change all the time in response to who's around us, the people we have around us, in response to what we read, in response to what we think about, in response to what we expose ourselves to. So I think we change all the time. So to show that in a fictional setting, to me, is one of the highest challenges of what we do. And that's how I thought about Belle. I mean, she changes a lot in the course of the series, and throughout the 8 books. There's a great deal of change that she undergoes.
When you started, did you think I've got 8 books?
Probably not, actually. No, the way a lot of publishing contracts are written, you write them sort of 2 at a time. You get a 2-book contract, and then you'll get a 3-book contract, and then it's what the publisher wants to do. They want to establish these characters and brands, and they want to have the stories along. I love the idea of the series, but I don't think I ever would have been kind of confident enough to think, that's it. There's going to be eight books rolling off the presses here. But I've been quite pleased with having 8 books, because I have been able to show Belle and the people around her daughter, Carla, her friend, Rhonda, to have these people change and grow in response to what happens to them. So no, and to answer your question, certainly not. If you'd asked me at the time, I would never have said that. I would have said, oh, look out, world. Here come a big bunch of books. But as I said, I'm very, very pleased. And I think they've been well published, in the sense that I really enjoy the covers, and had a very good editor and a good publisher, and that makes such a difference. The presentation in the world. It's like dressing up for Sunday school. You might be pious and godly, but unless you have on a new dress and maybe a nice hat, you just don't feel like it's right.
Folks joining us online, are there any questions? I can't really see that, Megan. Can you?
Nobody's typed any.
Okay.
Yeah, come on, people. You must have some kind of question here.
Any questions here? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm going to ask a more basic question. The name Belva.
Okay, it's actually.
Where did that come from?
It's Belfa, Belfa. My great aunt, who recently passed away at age 94. Belfa was her name. My grandmother's maiden name was Harshbarger, and my great aunt's name was Belfa Harshbarger. And I'd always admired her name. I just thought it sounded so unusual and pretty. Most people have heard of Belva, Belva, but this is Belfa, and she's called Belle for short. And I asked my great aunt Belfa, I said, so where did the name come from? She said, I don't know. I asked my parents once, and they had no idea either. They'd never known anyone with that name. She was Belfa May. So it came from my family.
Thank you.
That's great. Other.
Thank you, Julia. Sorry, I don't know these things. Okay, here we go. I wanted to ask you, given that you weren't here experiencing the impact of drugs on Huntington and on the state, how did you educate yourself to such an extent that you were able to write it in what feels like a very realistic way and true to life way?
Oh, I appreciate that. Just a lot of research. I felt that having been there, I knew the ground sort of beneath my feet. But you're right, I was not actually living there at really the worst of it. So what I did, just a lot of reading. I read a lot of articles. The one I mentioned, the LA Times did a 6-part article that was set in Huntington and right around there, and then also Portsmouth, Ohio, and areas like that. And I did go back to Huntington quite a lot when I was reading it. I would drive back there a lot. one thing I like is to when I'm trying to come up with character names other than Belfo, just the other names, I love to walk around old cemeteries in West Virginia and look at the names on the headstones, and just sort of say them out loud. Just say them out loud. There's just something very gratifying about it. I don't find cemeteries morbid at all or sad or dark. I find them really kind of a place where your thoughts can gather and where you think a lot about life and death and how very short our lives are and all we try to pack into that. So I would walk around cemeteries in West Virginia, and I'd had some conversations with law enforcement in Huntington. I didn't really know anybody. I mean, I talked to the police chief just as a regular old person, told him I wanted to write about it. And so they weren't like formal interviews, like journalism interviews, but I found people very willing to talk about it. The downtown really has changed so much in Huntington since I lived there. I mean, I went to Marshall, and then I went to grad school at Marshall as well before I left for Columbus and for Ohio State. So when I go back now, it doesn't feel like the same place at all. And that's very sad to me. I mean, my memories of Huntington are very positive and just this kind of place when you get on your bike and be gone all day. And I'm sure you all have these memories too. And you're thinking nowadays you would never let your own kids be gone all day, but we would just be out with our bikes and not even give it another thought. And when the sun started to go down, I remember just feeling that terrible ache inside me, like, no, just 10 more minutes, because when the sun obviously started to get dark, you had to go home. And you just didn't want that day to get away from you. You wanted to squeeze the last possible fun out of that day. And those are my memories of Huntington. And now, of course, it's, as a population is much diminished. A lot of the industry is gone, but Marshall's still there and doing well. So that's a positive as well. But that's a very good question. I mean, a combination of kind of book research and then going and actually walking around and, boots on the ground, is to me the best research to get a feel for it again. Everybody I know who's not alive anymore is buried in West Virginia. So when I go back to the cemeteries there, it's also a visiting family.
Well, I feel like you nailed it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We do have a question from Lenny online. Lenny, if you want to unmute and
Okay, thanks.
Hi,
Gosh,
Lynn.
hi, Julia. I don't know where to begin. I have a couple of comments. One, I really, when I read the title, A Killing, right? A Killing
Yes.
in the Hills. But as I read the book, there are multiple layers underneath that word. Lots of different kinds of murders going on in the lives and deaths of these people. And when we zero in on that event in the Salty Dog, that cold-blooded killing of those three men, and the different memories of the bystanders in that cafe, in that diner, the confusion, right? In the memories of what exactly happened. It reminds me of, parents too, of a lot of the children in this book, wondering, where did these kids go wrong? Where did we go wrong? They can't really pinpoint the times of the moment where they could have made a difference, right? And Bell does recount a time in the life with Carla when Carla got into, I don't even remember, got into trouble in her school. And she presses her mom with her contacts to, pull some strings and cash in on a few favors. And Bell won't do it. And she says, you've got to learn how to pay consequences for your actions. And she could have done it. She could have made it very easy for Carla at that point, but she doesn't. She tries to teach her daughter a lesson there. And so even though you say you don't want to be preachy, right? There's some lessons in there for us.
Yeah.
Particularly as parents. So I really appreciated the different layers.
I don't have children myself. I have nieces and nephews, but I'll tell you, I have no idea how parents do it.
Yeah.
How do you know? Are you doing it right? Are you not?
Yeah.
Are you oh, I don't know how you ever sleep.
That's right. But I also have a question. So is Killing the first book in the series?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So my question is, and I was an I'm a retired English teacher now.
Ah,
What did you learn about writing? But by the time you, as you wrote the 8 books, or certainly by the time you wrote the 8th book, what did you learn in the 8th book, by the time you wrote the 8th book from the first one?
you know, I had been a journalist for many years, so I was used to writing on deadline. So I could write quickly, but writing fiction, writing a book is so very different. You know, there's a cliche that every journalist has a novel in a desk drawer somewhere. And indeed, I had a lot of colleagues who wanted to be, and some have published novels from time to time, but it is so completely different that I think you might as well have been like, you know, a car mechanic and then write a novel. There's
Right.
just not much correlation at all between the two. And not just because, of course, journalism is real and true and these things really happen and fiction is made up. I don't mean that distinction. I just mean the distinction between a novel, a long piece of fiction, a long story where you're trying to hold the reader interest and having everything kind of fit together. I always think of it as like a jigsaw puzzle where something mentioned in the first chapters comes along to the end. Um, I, you learn quite I love the way you phrase that question. You say, what do you learn between 1 and 8? You do, it's so much. And so in terms of putting it together, when I read Killing in the Hills now, I keep thinking, oh, why did I do this? Why did I do that?
Right, right.
And I'm very proud of it, but I do think that the later books in the series are a little more nuanced, a little more intricate.
Good.
Bell's story becomes more complex, but yes, I think writing is very, very hard. And you hear some people say, oh, it's easy. I sit down and it's silk off a spool. And I think, well, that's not been
No, it's not. It's right.
not my experience.
Well,
Not our
I'll,
experience
I'll
either.
look forward to reading the rest of them and see how you changed as a novelist too.
Oh yeah, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me. Just go to Julia Keller, all one word, juliakeller.net. Go to my website, and at the bottom there's a little link. And so this is true for any of you. If you want to ask questions after tonight too, feel free to email me. I love hearing from readers, and so just go to juliakeller.net.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lenny.
We have another question. Kelly has a question. Have any other West Virginia authors influenced your work?
Oh, yes, indeed. I mean, boy, as a state, I should have mentioned that at the outset. I mean, as a state, we may have our problems from time to time, but boy, do we produce the great writers. I mean, we just Jane Ann Phillips was a real inspiration as I was in college, particularly when I began to read her novels. And then in Chicago, she came to Chicago once to do an event for one of her books, and I got to meet her, and I was like almost speechless. I mean, I've met many famous authors just because I was cultural critic at the Tribune, and famous authors come by all the time. I mean, Umberto Eco and E.L. Doctorow and Joyce Carol Oates, and famous people were coming by all the time, Arthur Miller. But Jane Ann Phillips, fellow West Virginian. And so we ended up having lunch, and I just was able to tell her. And there's something so wonderful about telling someone who you don't know personally, but just tell them how much they influenced and inspired you. Is there anything better? I mean, those of you who are teachers and perhaps business leaders, you know what I mean, when you're able to meet someone who did mean so much to you and they never knew it because you're not personal friends. I mean, that's a different kind of relationship when it's a friend or a personal mentor. But Jane Ann Phillips is the one that comes immediately to mind. Let's see, growing up. Well, I think not specifically West Virginia, more Eastern Kentucky, but right across the river, Jesse Stewart, who's always a favorite of my father's. The Thread That Runs So True was his book about being a teacher at a very poor school in Appalachia. My dad would love that story of teaching. Who are some of your favorite West Virginia authors?
Folks, who are your favorite West Virginia authors?
Yeah.
Anybody? Jane Ann Phillips is one of mine. Other authors that who do we like?
Kelly responded Anne Pancake.
Who?
Kelly
that
asked the question, responded Anne Pancake.
Yes, Anne Pancake.
Yes. Oh, Anne Pancake, absolutely. Strange as This Weather Has Been, some of my very favorite novels. That captures the sort of contemporary feel of West Virginia so wonderfully. Yes.
I met Stephen Kuntz when he came to Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
And loved, I had the same kind of, moment that you're speaking of when I got to meet him. I was just 21 years old when I had just moved to Chicago when he came there. And so, yeah, that's a good one.
Yes.
Megan, can you scroll up?
Because more chats have come in.
Okay.
Tina asked, she read all of the series and couldn't put it down once she started, and asked if you have plans to write any other series.
I'm sort of embarked upon that right now. It's a historical fiction. I love historical fiction too. I mean, contemporary is fine, but historical. But I've just finished a novel, and we're kind of working on it right now with the editor. It's set actually in London in the 1750s, which was a time period when everything was in flux and the world was changing so rapidly. There was no organized police force. And so this is about the first organized police force when they looked around one day and they said, well, gee, rich people, when they get something stolen, they go hire somebody to go get it back. But if you're poor, well, too bad for you. So it's sort of based in that time. So yeah, and I love the idea of a series. Now that I've done one, it's like I love that, the idea of having multiple books. I love having those spines all across the shelf, with all the spines being at the same. So yes, that's something I'm embarked upon even now. So yes, and I might return to Bell. Sometimes I think I have some ideas to take Bell beyond where that final book ends there.
Someone responded that one of their favorite authors was Denise Jardina, and I would agree with that too. But when you said you went to London, when she wrote A Storming Heaven, and then she did a story based in, was it in Scotland? I can't remember. Or no, England, right? It was Mad King George.
Oh, Good King. I think it was Good King.
Good King George.
Yeah.
Was that the name of? Okay, I can remember, but I remember thinking when she made that jump that she left, Appalachia, I was like, I was a little betrayed.
How dare she? How dare she? Yeah, she's quite wonderful. Yes, love her work. Love her work. Storming Heaven is one of my favorite novels. Yes.
So just as a side note, I was in high school, and she was paid to go around to schools, and there was a competition for kids and seniors, I guess it was seniors, to get to study with her. And we got pulled out of class. If you were selected, there were kids from all over Kanawha County that got to spend a workshop with her for one week. And that was my first real life, real author that I ever got to meet. And,
what a wonderful time. When you mentioned meeting her, there's one I forgot. It's a West Virginia poet who I was able to meet at Charleston once. They had a book festival there. She has since passed away. Irene McKinney. I don't know if anyone knows her poetry. Absolutely adored her poetry. And it's just so beautiful. And I really regret that she wasn't more widely known. And if I were in charge of the world, I would make certain that her poetry is in every anthology. She is just a wonderful, wonderful poet. And I was able to meet her, and unbeknownst to me at the time, she was right at the end of her life then. She was ill, but I didn't know it. I mean, I heard her read and spoke to her afterward, and I'm so glad I was able to, because she died shortly thereafter. But Irene McKinney, if you ever find her poetry, it will move you.
Yeah, there's somebody had a question. Will you scroll up, Megan?
I don't think we've missed any of the questions. It's mostly just comments on the authors. Oh no, Debbie Allen did say she had a question. Debbie, you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I feel like a sense of place is an important part of being from West Virginia. Many of us don't think directly about it, but I think most of us feel it, and I certainly am aware of it. You did a gorgeous job with painting both the physical and emotional landscape of the actual geography, and I appreciated that. But I wondered, as you wrote that, did you write those sections separately from moving the storyline forward?
Oh, no. I know what you're saying. It's like, was there the action and then you go back and try to set the sense of place? I really didn't. It kind of just came naturally, organically from the story that I was trying to tell. But I do know what you mean. And that's always, if anything, I probably err too much on the side of putting too much place in there, I think, and kind of getting away from the action. And I really want to create that balance. And I'm like you. I mean, I think with West Virginia, it is inextricable. An inextricable part of being from West Virginia is that sense of place. You can't kind of be, and maybe you need to go away and then you're more aware of it. I think if you'd asked me, if we were having this conversation and I was in, 8th or 9th grade, or I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have said like, oh, it's a special place and we have great physical beauty juxtaposed with terrible social problems. And I wouldn't have said anything like that. It's like asking a fish about water. It's all we know. So
I would agree.
Once
your language
away
is
from it.
painterly.
Yeah. And then we can come back. So no, it's an interesting process question. I mean, I like that question because, and I can kind of tell when I'm going back and editing my work, and I love revision, by the way. That's maybe one of the few writers that I know that I love revising. That to me is where the real magic is. But if I have kind of come to a full stop and sort of stuck in some description because I think it sounds pretty, I know, cut it out, it doesn't belong. It's got to flow organically within the story, or else you can kind of tell when a writer has stopped and has thought, okay, the stars were like, and then they come up with some very elaborate metaphor. You can always tell. It's kind of like you can sort of almost see the sweat on that, where they've really labored too hard to get that image in there. To me, it has to be natural and flow organically, or it doesn't belong. And I try to just cut it out. If I come across a section that reads too writerly to me, there's an old saying among writers that, those sections of your book that say, where you think you're saying like, look, Ma, I'm writing, if you're ever doing that, cut that out and get back to the story and back to the action.
We're gonna use that now when we're editing magazine articles. Is it like, look, Ma, I'm writing moments? Yeah. I love that.
Oh, you can always tell too. And as writers, I mean, why not? I mean, we should take delight in what we do because Lord knows we don't make much money. So why not take delight in it? But it's one of the great perks of it. And when you sit back and read it, and it does, I mean, I love, as I said, I love revision. I love working. I have a very good agent, a very good editor, and I trust them and believe what they say. And when they say, this section, this is absolutely beautiful, but it really holds up the story. It's like, got it, out it goes.
I was thinking, you talked a little bit about this, like having the themes, in each of the books. Something that struck me in Killing in the Hills is you have this, you're tackling economic issues, of course, the opioid issues, but there's also this healthcare desert mention. I felt like you've got that in there too. But then I was wondering, did you start with this did you start with the crime, or did you start with the message, or how did it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's funny you mentioned the healthcare thing, because originally that was going to be a more prominent element, because I feel so strongly about the lack of access to quality and affordable healthcare is such a terrible problem in rural areas, not just West Virginia, but anywhere where, I mean, I feel fortunate, in Chicago and in places like Columbus. You're in these big cities, you've got these massive hospital systems with, fantastic research hospitals and all this. And then you have places where I know, my father, he died of cancer very young. He was 51. And when he was diagnosed, I was working in Columbus. And so I brought him from Huntington up to Columbus. And one of his oncologists there said, really, you drive, over 3 hours? And I said, well, yes, sir. I mean, we don't have this kind of a facility in Huntington. And he said, oh, I'm from New York City and I could throw a stick and hit 12 great medical centers. And I said, well, that's not the case for us. I mean, I was a little perturbed. I thought, is he not listening to me? I mean, we just don't have those facilities. So in answer to your question, that was going to be a bigger element in Killing in the Hills. And I thought it was getting a little issue thick, a little thick with social issues. So I kind of ratcheted that back a little bit. It still remains a motive, as you know, for one of the gentlemen who's involved in the drug trade, but it's not as prominent as I'd wanted to make it. So you're a very astute reader, I have to say, because that was definitely a thread that I just didn't want this to become this massive pile of social problems, because it also seemed unfair to do that. I mean, these are problems that a lot of places have. And I never wanted to stigmatize West Virginia or suggest that, we're uniquely burdened or cursed. We're not. We have certain issues, and we're dealing with them. And I am more inspired by the resilience of people than depressed by looking at just the number of issues there are. So, but that's a great question. You're a reader.
Well, I thought it was subtle. I didn't, and please don't take it as I thought it was, heavy-handed. I just was really, it was subtle, but it resonated with me. I thought you did that really well throughout all of the books.
Thank you. No, that was definitely a goal. Yes, it's like how do we render these, but without making an issue of the week. Do you remember they used to have like those used to be TV movies on, I know when I was growing up, and it was always an issue of the week. It would be like anorexia, or it would be, some kind of, it'd always be one issue or another. And people, I think you can kind of tell when writers are writing that way, they're writing of the issue and not of the people. And it's got to be people. We want to read about people, not issues. So.
But where did you come up with the mystery part of it? Like where in the process did you, when you started the book, do you think, okay, this is going to be the question, the mystery that we're going to solve?
And like, and who's going to do it and all that, there are two different ways of writing. I remember I was doing a Q&A once. Some of you may know Michael Connelly, the wonderful mystery writer. And I was interviewing him once, and I said, so which do you do it? Because I really was curious how he did it. I don't work from an outline at all. I just kind of go where it leads me. I almost think it's just kind of like, the phrase where the day takes you. And then I may have to go back and fill in a few things to make it plausible, the way the story moves and twists and turns to get to its end. But he was the same way, as you kind of enter this fugue state and you let the story kind of inhabit you. Some people, though, write from a very rigorous outline, and they don't veer from that. And that's perfectly acceptable. That's just never been my way. I write more and kind of letting this, I know the general story I want to tell. And within that, though, things happen. I love being surprised. Some of you may, I don't want to give too much away, but in a future novel, there are two characters who end up falling in love. And I didn't see that coming. And again, I don't want to give too much away because I do love surprises in novels, but there's I don't even want to give the person's profession because it'll give it away. But there's a man, and he suddenly finds that he's watching this woman, and he just suddenly realizes something happens to him. He feels this, and then that becomes a whole plot point as that develops. I didn't know that was going to happen. I did not know that was going to happen. It took me by surprise too, that I realized, oh, this is what he's feeling for her, and he's so surprised by his feeling. And to me, that's so rich and special to do it that way, as opposed to having an outline and say, okay, person X here is going to fall in love with person Y. That doesn't work out, and then you make things harder for yourself, because you said at the end you have to make sure it all works together. It's all plausible, and that you have created. I mean, I love having an ending that, and I always said this is why I think Agatha Christie is such a great writer. When you read her endings, you think to yourself two things simultaneously. You think, wow, I didn't see that coming, but of course.
Yeah.
And you think them at exactly the same time. That's when you know you've really achieved something. And as you know, A Killing in the Hills, the ending is left a little ambiguous. And I did that on purpose because obviously I want you to read the next book in the series. So.
May I ask?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't want to interrupt.
Well, no, I was going to ask Katie's question on there before it scrolls away. What advice would you give in finding an agent?
First thing I would say is, and this is absolutely God's honest truth, finding a good agent is harder than finding a publisher. That's how important it is to find the right agent. It's very, very difficult. Agents don't take on many writers. I mean, I was fortunate because I just won a Pulitzer Prize, so agents contacted me. But generally, as when you are starting out, finding a good agent is the crucial thing to do. I often tell young writers too. I've taught writing at many colleges. I've taught at the University of Chicago. I think someone here mentioned being an alumnus of that. I've taught at Princeton. I've taught at these major schools. I've taught a lot of really good writers. And I always say to them, having no agent is better than having the wrong agent, because your agent is not only your conduit to the publishing world, not only the person that makes the deal and knows the editors to contact. Your agent is a person that's going to kind of be your ambassador out in the world, be your creative ambassador, and to say, this person's work is worth seeing. So the one thing I always recommend to people is look at the acknowledgments of novels that you admire, and invariably an agent will be thanked. And then you have the agent's name. And with this wonderful world we live in now, it's all interconnected. You can go to the website of that particular agent. Agents take a long time getting back to you. They're very busy. They get thousands of submissions a week. The odds are always going to be against you, but so what? That's what I always say to people. The odds are always against you. I mean, what are the odds that I always look at myself and say, you know, a kid from West Virginia would end up in Chicago and win a Pulitzer Prize, and I've published 14 novels now. There's absolutely no way that should ever happen. The probabilities would tell you that can never happen, and yet it did. So I always say that to young aspiring writers, that there's the world always needs the next good story, and it could very well be yours. So I never want to discourage people, but I will say it is very difficult to get a good agent. That's one of the primary routes I would say, is to get the name of an agent of a writer you admire and write to that agent. And their submission guidelines are very clear. Do exactly what they tell you to do. If they say send the first 50 pages, don't send the first 60. They never want attachments. They always want you to put it right in the body of the email, and it can be done. It is unlikely. As I said, the odds are always against you, but they always are. The fact that we're here on this earth at this time is kind of a wildly unlikely thing. So that's always my advice, is the next great story could very well be yours. And heaven knows the world needs stories, and we need heart, and that's what stories give us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on your development of characters. My profession is not related at all to writing or teaching. Just in Killing of the Hills, you have, of course, Belle's story from her childhood, a sister in jail, the neighbors, the drug trafficking. You have the illicit love affair and developmentally challenged young man looking for a crime. You have Rhonda, and I think everyone's worked with a Rhonda, you know.
Yeah.
So how do you pull all that together, or how did it come to you?
Well,
If you wouldn't mind expounding on that.
I was just saying, when you say it like that, it sounds like a lot. It sounds like too much. I really wanted, there's such complexity, just even in the smallest of small towns. So many interlocking and interacting personalities at all times. So I hope it's not too much. It does sound like a lot, though, when you're saying it there. Again, I never work from an outline. I always just try to kind of enter what I call this fugue state, where you see all these things happening in front of you and you think about what conversations are like. I mean, I love dialogue that sounds real, along with the ums and the wells and the repeating words. And we don't talk in this beautiful oratorical highfalutin way. Most of us just talk in regular, ordinary ways. And I've always maintained that there is more poetry in just the regular, ordinary, everyday speech of anybody, be it somebody who's, working on a road crew, or teaching in a high school, or all the various professions that we have in this world. There's just more poetry in the average speech of people than there is in all the books of poetry ever published. So I try to listen to a lot of dialogue that way. But when it comes to putting all those disparate elements together, I really do just let the story sort of unfurl. And if it does get too thick and complicated, I have good readers who will tell me so and say, yeah, you kind of lost me there. Chapter 4, it kind of gets a little unwieldy. So you have to have good readers that you trust.
Thank you. And I think the book is fabulous.
Oh, thank you so much. Glad you enjoy them. I mean, I know for me as a reader, the books that I read and admire, and I know how life-changing they are. And if I'm not in the middle of a really good book, I feel kind of bereft. I imagine you all are all probably like that too. When you don't have a good one going, if you don't have a good one on the go, it's like you feel it. You feel the lack in your life.
What books are you reading right now?
Let's see. I am, I have to say, I go to the library a lot. I like to buy books too, just because, you want to support writers. But I also find a lot of really good books at Goodwill, in used bookstores. I just love, because it's almost like a serendipitous find. And I find myself thinking, okay, the good Lord must have wanted me to have this book, because you find one, you think, why did I come across this book at this time? One of my great Goodwill finds is a book called Crow Lake by a Canadian writer named Mary Lawson. Very tiny little book, Crow Lake, C-R-O-W Lake. If you ever see it anywhere, it's a small town in Canada, a farm. What happens to this family? It's a brief tale, but she's so gets family life and sibling relationships better than any book I think I've ever come across. The book, it just gleams in your mind. So Crow Lake by a woman named Mary Lawson. And again, that was a Goodwill find. On my desk right now, let's see, I've been reading a lot of historical fiction just because that's what I'm involved in now. I love the Hilary Mantel books about Henry VIII and Cromwell, who was Henry VIII's good friend. And I'm reading a lot of nonfiction too. I mean, I've always got at least, probably 5 or 6 books going at once. That may be true for a lot of you all as well. I can't stand to just be doing one book at a time. I like to have multiple bookmarks always going.
Questions online? Do we have any other questions online? We didn't miss anybody's, did we?
No.
So if you had to pick a theme song for Bell, what would that be?
I do think of that. I love, that Kathy Mattea album where it's the Cole songs.
Yeah.
Those, I would say some of those on there. I'm trying to think of the title of the actual song. One, traveling down that coal town road, listen to the rubber tires whine. Goodbye to Buckeye and White Sycamore. I'm leaving you behind. I've been a coal man all my life, laying down track in the hole. You know which song I mean? You know that one? Yeah. Those are, I would love something like that. I would love Kathy Mattea to do the theme song for a Bell movie or a Bell TV series. That to me would be heaven. I would ask no more of life than that.
My daughter just said, a writer and a singer. Whoa.
I love those West Virginia well, I said Kathy Mattea, of course, the great West Virginia singer songwriters, and grew up listening to them, and I think all those would just be perfect for Bell. There has been talk from time to time of a Bell series, and we've gotten pretty far at some point. So I will keep you posted. And if a Bell series is coming out, I keep thinking, why not have Jennifer Garner in the lead? See, good Charleston girl. So have her play Belle. She's a little young. Well, maybe not young anymore. Well, who among us is young anymore, right?
So have you had any, interest in for movie rights or?
Yes, we have. Actually, we sold the TV rights, so it's a matter of whether they make it or not. The way they do is a lot of producers will buy various books. So we're fingers crossed. It takes a long time, a long time. I was reading about a TV series the other day, and it said it had actually been in development for 12 years. And I'm thinking, 12 years? How do you? You have to have such patience. I read a great line the other day by a theatrical producer in New York City, and he said people don't seem to understand. He'd been the producer of Hamilton, of course, big hit, right? But he's had so many other productions too that he was sure were going to be hits, and they weren't. They were horrible flops, and he lost millions of dollars. And he said, for a Broadway show, even to get made, much less be a success, he said it takes a minimum of 15 separate miracles. And I think that's so true. It's true of publishing. It's in any sort of arts field. It's like that. It takes all these separate miracles all having to come together at exactly the right time. But the beauty part is it does happen. It does happen. Not often, but that's why it's so special and wondrous and magical when it does. It comes together, and then there it is. And we've all had times and we read things and we think, how did this even come into the world? Probably 15 separate miracles.
Well, I hope that you do get this made into a TV series. It makes me think of our very first book. Have you heard about or read the book Diamond Doris? Have you heard about?
No, I don't know about that. Tell me.
So Diamond Doris she's still alive, but she's probably in her, what now, like close to 90. She's in her 80s at least, lives in Atlanta, but she grew up in West Virginia, around outside of Beckley, Southern Coalfields, Black woman, grew up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and became an international diamond thief.
Oh,
like
I love it.
Crazy. Like you read this and you think, say what? Like she would fly to where did she fly? Monte Carlo, and walks into a Cartier. I mean, she didn't rob like you're just, you're small. She went to Tiffany and Cartier and walked out with $500,000, $500,000 diamond ring, and did this over and over and over. And she's from West Virginia. And when I discovered this book, I thought, what? But the reason I discovered it was because it was going to be made into a movie, and to this day, and then it's been optioned like a couple of times. It's never been made into the movie, but it's absolutely fascinating to me. The book is not particularly well written, or well, I'm being recorded, so now hope the author doesn't read that or hear me say that. The story is just fascinating. So
isn't it? And that's the thing. It can be so wonderful. And then, and it is just these miracles. I that's the only thing about the arts field that is, I think, if you enjoy it, you want to be, you know, adding your light to the sum of lights and adding your story, fine, but you can never have any expectation of things getting made. And because again, so many little things have to come along. Bell was very, very close to getting made as a series from ABC. This was a couple of years ago. And we were this close. And then at the last minute, they opted for they had another series, a police series that they were doing. And it was, do you remember Marcia Clark, who was on the O.J. Simpson trial, prosecutor? She had written a series, but it was like set in a big city. It was the same story you've heard a million times, overworked. And I say, but no, this is West Virginia. People are going to want to see this. Well, they picked the other one, and it like lasted 2 episodes and then went away to nothing. And it was like, it was so maddening, because I thought if I really think that it would resonate with people. So write to Netflix and tell them you want to see this, people.
Okay, there you go.
No, seriously, that's what has to happen. So many things we had a really good writer, we had a good team behind it and everything. Just never know. You know, the last minute they think, we want this thing set in New York City instead of this one set in, you know, this fictional Acres Gap, West Virginia. And I'm thinking, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. So one day we shall prove them. We shall prevail.
Yes. Everybody write. You write to Netflix. How about other questions? Anyone here? So you are working on another series right now.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about the I mean, because is quitting the only nonfiction?
No, you know, the very first book I published was a biography of Richard Jordan Gatling, who invented the Gatling gun. And I loved doing that. Traveled all over North Carolina, and I learned to shoot a Gatling gun. And he was just such a fascinating man. I mean, he invented his gun because he really thought it would end war. He thought if you made war so terrible, people would not fight wars anymore. Well, he's a little wrong about that, but he was a good guy. And during the Civil War, he would only sell his gun to the North. He would not sell it to the South, because he did not believe in slavery. But had a tragic life. But that was a nonfiction book. And then what I really wanted to write was fiction. But yes, this quitting book came about for just, I loved your description of it initially, Nikki, when you were talking about it. It is indeed about pivoting, about not always being so upset when you make another decision. That we particularly like with kids, we never want them to quit sports teams or ballet or these things that we want our kids to do, because we keep telling them, you got to stick with it. Grit is everything. And I don't think grit is everything. There are times, and we know it in our heart and soul, when you do want to quit something. So I also talk about the neuroscience of quitting in the book, that we now know what happens in the brain, what specific neurons fire when we make another decision, when we're going on one path and we decide, I'll do this and not this thing. So I found it quite fascinating. I did many hundreds of interviews for it. It's called Quitting, a Life Strategy, and the subtitle is The Myth of Perseverance and How the New Science of Giving Up Can Set You Free. So it just, and I love hearing people's stories about their lives. So it's very much a compendium of these stories. Just how everybody knew what I meant when I said, tell me something you quit, where it ended up being the making of you or the unmaking of you. Can be either way. I mean, I didn't want to stack the deck. I really wanted to hear the stories, and they're all different ways and all different stories. People who've left jobs and marriages and changed political parties and changed belief systems, and how they came to that decision. And again, that's interwoven with the neuroscience of quitting. So, and I love nonfiction. I did it for years as a journalist. And so I love putting together a lot of information and doing a lot of really intense reporting, and then putting it together in a book that can just maybe give people a different way of looking at their life. Because I think we're terribly hard on ourselves. We're way too hard on ourselves. there's nothing wrong with having a goal and having standards, but you also have to forgive yourself sometimes too, and realize that there is another day, and we're not wicked or bad or terrible or losers if we make another decision.
Yeah, goodness. Someone did ask. Katie is asking, is Acres Gap a combination of actual West Virginia towns? I'm going to close my ears because I think it's Clay.
You know, I was aiming at a town of that size. I really was. You know, I didn't want to name an actual town. I was afraid that if I did that, you're kind of, then you're sort of bound in. You know, you have to, and I didn't want to do that. And I also didn't want to stigmatize any town either. I wanted this to be a town that is struggling, but is going to get back on its feet. So I deliberately made it fictional. But yeah, I was thinking of that. Although it's funny, I would hear from a lot of people say, I know where it is. It's in Southern West Virginia, and I would always say, you're right. You know, it's like, that's what I always say. Everybody will tell them, you know, when the person comes to the vet and always says, my dog is the best dog in the history of the world, the vet says, and they're always right.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, my dog is the best in the history of the world, just for the record.
I don't know. I think I'd argue with that. So
sorry, you're just wrong. This has been delightful, and I've loved your all's questions, and I'm always so pleased to hear that, particularly for people who live in West Virginia, the books resonate. You know, occasionally I would get a nasty letter from somebody because there's occasional curse word or this or that. And some people, I think, kind of misunderstood and thought I was making fun of West Virginia. I mean, I never know what to say to that. I mean, if that's their interpretation, I don't want to argue with them. But truly, these books were intended as being very celebratory of West Virginia in the end, and of the people and of this place, as I said, of just stunning beauty. There is no state like it, and there are no people like West Virginians. And it certainly was not ever meant as anything detrimental. But I do get the occasional email that's kind of angry, and I said the profanity sometimes will take people back. And I just want to say, like, I don't know what to tell you. People do use profanity, and certainly Bell, sometimes the situation will call for an impassioned response that involves perhaps language we wouldn't want to use in front of our mothers, but there you go.
Well, thank you so very much. Thank you for joining us. And the next time you do come to Morgantown, you know, let us know, because you need to stay at the Hotel Morgan. For
I will.
Sure.
Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, the first chapter of Quitting, Nikki and I have talked about it. The first chapter of Quitting, when I talk about being in Morgantown, it was I actually had a small room at the Hotel Morgan. That was my darkest hour. So if that's not enough of a hook to get you to read the book. But truly I'd love to hear from anyone. JuliaKeller.net. Keep in touch. As I said, I'd love to get emails, and if you have anything else, any other questions about the books or anything else, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All righty. Good night.